The trade deadline has just passed, the All-Star break is right around the corner, and I think it is fair to say that the New York Knicks have the best roster in the NBA right now. I mean, currently, they sit at 4th in the Eastern Conference with a solid little record of 33-20. Now, before the trade deadline, the Knicks were already nearing the top of the Eastern Conference. And now that it has passed, they were able to make some moves. And honestly, not only did the New York Knicks not really lose any true value on their roster, but they sure as hell gained a ton of talent. And when you are at the top of the Eastern Conference and only seem to get better as the season progresses, it's looking really good for you. I mean, especially since the Philadelphia 76ers, one of the top dogs in the East, lost their superstar, their MVP level player in Joel Embiid, so they're basically out of the running. And then you've got the Milwaukee Bucks, who just fired their head coach, so they look shaky as ever now. I think it is a perfect time for you to buy in to the New York Knicks. Now, this New York team is a very interesting bunch. They are currently being led by their head coach, Tom Thibodeau, who is in his 4th season with the New York Knicks, and it seems to be going well so far in his tenure. I know that in his first season, they were a first-round exit, but just last year, they got past the first round. They had beaten the Cleveland Cavaliers and made it to the Eastern Conference semifinal round, where they would eventually get bounced out. However, this season, they look even better than they did a year ago. Now, this team is often compared to the 2015 Atlanta Hawks. Why? Because the Atlanta Hawks were a very good Eastern Conference team. However, they didn't have that superstar to carry them. They had 4 All-Stars that season. Yeah, 4 All-Stars and no superstar is kind of wild to think about. But out of those 4 All-Stars, they had guys like Al Horford, Kyle Korver, Paul Millsap, and Jeff Teague. Together, they were really good with the Atlanta Hawks. But on championship teams, they would be considered maybe the 3rd or 4th best player on those teams. So they didn't really accomplish anything in the playoffs. However, their regular season was very good, and that's where the comparisons come in with this year's New York Knicks. You see, the thing about this New York Knicks roster is that no one on it is seen as a legitimate superstar. They have 2 All-Stars, not as many as the Atlanta Hawks all those years ago, but they do have 2 guys. One in Julius Randle, who's been there for a few years now, and he has, his ups and downs. One year he'll have an All-Star season, the next he'll look terrible. This is one of those All-Star years for Julius Randle. And the other guy is Jalen Brunson. Now, this is where things get a little bit controversial, because some NBA fans and analysts do view him as a superstar caliber player. However, I believe that if you are to be considered a true superstar, then you can be the best player on a championship winning team. Do I think Jalen Brunson is that? No. Do I think he could become that? Maybe in the near future. Right now, I don't see a team winning a championship with Jalen Brunson as their best player, right? I mean, maybe this New York Knicks team does it just because of how loaded they are. But anyway, I think it's only fair that we take a look at Brunson's numbers this season, and then you yourself can decide whether you believe he is a superstar or not. So far this season, he's gone on to average 27.5 points per game, which is a career high for him. In fact, over the past few seasons, Brunson has progressively averaged way more points per game. Just last year, he went on to average 24 points per game, and that was a season in which he finished 12th in MVP voting and 3rd in Most Improved Player of the Year voting. So, the NBA has taken notice of Jalen Brunson's improvement. Now, maybe it's because his field goal attempts per game have also skyrocketed. Just 4 years ago, they were sitting at around 9, and now they are 20 per game. And I think it also helps that his field goal percentage sits at a pretty high mark of 48% on this season, as does his 3-point percentage, which currently sits at about 40%. He is 40% from the 3-point line. That is very impressive, especially for Jalen Brunson. Now, his other stats look like 6.5 assists per game, another career high for Brunson, as well as nearly 4 rebounds. And that's pretty impressive when you consider he is a 6'2" point guard on a Knicks roster that has a few big men of their own. Alright, but enough about Jalen Brunson. I also want to get to a few of the new acquisitions that the New York Knicks have recently made. First off, let's take a look at OG Anunoby. Now, he was traded for a few weeks before the deadline had passed, so he's been on this team for quite a while. He's played 14 games for the New York Knicks, and in those 14 games, he's averaged 35 minutes per. It seems as though Tom Thibodeau loves this man. Of course, all Knicks starters have insane minutes, because that's just how he runs his rotations. He runs his players into the ground. But anyway, you know, in 14 games so far, OG Anunoby has gone on to average 15.6 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, and more impressively, he is shooting 51% from the field, 39% from the three-point line. And now, while all of those stats are pretty, we all know OG Anunoby's best quality, you know, the reason they traded for him, and that is this man's defense. His defense is, you know, he was able to bring it from Toronto to New York, and I do think the Knicks have been a better defensive team when he is on the court. So it was a great acquisition. Of course, he has just recently been injured. He is set to miss around 3 weeks, but of course, during one of those weeks, the All-Star break will have passed, so it won't feel as though OG Anunoby is out for too long. Another acquisition that the Knicks have gone out and made was Bojan Bogdanovic from the Detroit Pistons. Now, this occurred very recently, on the deadline day to be precise, so he hasn't played too many games with the Knicks so far. So if we take a look at his averages while he was with the Pistons, he put up 20 points per game, his assists looked to be about 2.5, and his rebounds were sitting about 3.5. Of course, those are going to decrease. Maybe his rebounds and assists increase just because his role will be a lot lesser on this Knicks team who is looking to contend. As for his, you know, shooting splits, right now from the field, he is averaging about 46% on the season. And from the three-point line, it seems as though he's been a pretty good shooter, 41% from the three-point line for Bogdanovic. I do think it was an excellent piece that the New York Knicks have added. Him, along with OG Anunoby and a few others, really give this team depth. And that's what reminds me of, you know, the Atlanta Hawks from 2015, is that Bojan and OG Anunoby, they're fringe all-stars, okay? They're pretty close to what Jeff Teague and Kyle Korver were. Not in terms of play style, obviously, but in terms of talent. And a few players I'd be sorry to, you know, forget mentioning have been Mitchell Robinson and Josh Hart. Those guys have also played really well. You know, Mitchell Robinson has gone out and he's grabbed a ton of boards. I'm sure he's averaging about 10 rebounds per game this year. As from the field, you know, 60%. He is a center, so a lot of his shots are from like inside the key. They're not as far, so his, you know, field goal percentage will be a bit higher. As for Josh Hart, he isn't expected to put up record-breaking numbers, but he's been great for team chemistry. You know, the Villanova boys seem to love him, Dante DiVincenzo, and Jalen Brunson. They all have this great chemistry. Hell, the chemistry is so good that Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart have started a podcast. Honestly, I think they've got the perfect mix of talent and players to make a real go at this thing. But anyway, that's about it for this video. Really just wanted to cover the Knicks before the All-Star break because I have no idea how they're going to look coming out of it. Obviously, they could make a push for the 1 seed, depending on if the Cavaliers' hot streak ends sooner rather than later, and if the Boston Celtics go through some problems later in the season. Other than that, you're looking at a middle-of-the-road team who may just get bounced in the second round. Alright, that's about it for this video. Now, catch y'all later. Much love. Peace.